All right. So it's quite interesting. My presentation today will be a direct follow-up of what Pascal has been articulating very, very nicely this morning. And I can reassure Pascal already, we are in milestone 2. It looks very exciting. So let's take just one step back for a minute and continue around inter-carrier connectivity, inter-carrier network services, and understand multiple microphones I discover. What does it mean to build an inter-carrier service in the era of NFV and tomorrow? And again, we come back to the same concept. I have an enterprise service, typical carrier Ethernet connectivity, VPN with MPLS. And then, as Kevin was saying yesterday, some people in this enterprise, they like to listen to music, and then it's kind of bringing the whole network to its knees. Some Amdocs people love to go into GitHub and get some new coding exercise. Some other love to watch YouTube at work, very nice. So now we need to build kind of an overlay network on top of the typical MPLS, and we're going to use SD-WAN for it, for example. And on top of it, my CIO at Amdocs has just informed me he wants to move all of Microsoft services into Microsoft 360 on the cloud with external data centers. So we're going to connect all of our network, international network, into data centers. And on top of that, we're going to have security, backup services, and so on and so on. How do you build this in a way which is automated, which is agile, which is manageable, right? And I was talking a lot to my CIO, because we are running a company of 26,000 employees. We have quite a lot of offices across the world. Those challenges that we, at the end of the day, deploy at service providers, we're having them ourselves as an enterprise. And he said to me two very interesting things. The first one, he said, I am not looking to reduce my IT spend. So that was eye-opening for me. However, I am hoping to get more services, different services, and more specifically, much more management around my network. Not only that, I do have quite a bit of IT towers and data centers and servers that I would, if possible, very happily move over into the service provider. To make this happen, he needs dynamism. He needs the ability to touch into his network. He needs the ability to replace some of the connectivities. He needs to add applications on top of it. He needs to have it automated. As most of you know, big enterprises, small as well, they have their own network operating center. They have their own service operating center. They want to be able to actually manage their network with the agility and ability that they are used to when this is their IT infrastructure. Question is, how do we reach that? And how we move away from the world of manual connectivity, I think the picture is very well telling, into a different approach. And so that's what we've been trying to do. To achieve that, what do we want? As an enterprise, we want to have very specifically a harmonized experience. I want to have the same experience if I'm in the US, if I'm in Singapore, in China, in South America, or in Israel. I want to be able to manage this network holistically. I want the network behavior to be the same across wherever my offices are and wherever my data centers are behaved. I want to be able to spin up and spin down my services on the go, on demand, and as I need to. Give you a very simple example. A CEO giving a town hall to 26,000 employees across the world. You need to spin up a network on demand for 2 hours, once in a quarter or once in a year. This is surprisingly complicated to achieve. So to do that, you need inter-carrier connectivity. You will have your host service provider that he's going to be your interface to the world, and he's going to have back-to-back connection to the rest of the other service providers. But not doing this just on the connectivity layer, now he needs to do that as well on the application layer. And that brings a whole new world of troubles. So on the connectivity layer, I think we have a very mature approach. MEF has been, I would say, not only forward-thinking, but instrumental in having a harmonized, well-defined carrier Ethernet connectivity across service provider, across enterprises, across vendors. The next step then, and that's what all MEF 3.0 is about, is provide a framework not just for the connectivity, but for the end-to-end service. And to achieve this, you need, first of all, an adoption of the community for the orchestration mechanism, the specified interface, the publisher interface, and of course, that each and every player in this game will agree to the same set of interface and standards. Pascal was saying just earlier, it's not just a game of the big, tier 1, tier 0 service provider. All of us need to adhere to this approach. And that's what we heard from RP just earlier and Pascal just now, a combination of open source in which each and every one of us can go and contribute, modify, change, adopt or adapt the code in order to respond to whatever new challenge and whatever new features is necessary, accompanied with enveloping specification and standardization mechanism here adopted at the MEF, and then finalized into a certification program that we call Can Adopt. And this is what we've been doing. So I encourage you very much to have a look at our showcase. And when I say ours, it's not Amdocs, it's really a community showcase in which AT&T, Colt, Orange, Ciena, Fujitsu, and Amdocs, we all kind of bound together and said, how do we demonstrate that it's feasible? How do we demonstrate that if we adopt those specification, if we adopt those interfaces, we will be able to create automated connectivity, automated end-to-end service, and of course, automated restoration, triggered activation, triggered scalable bandwidth. Effectively here, what we've done is using all of the MEF standardized interfaces, starting with Cantata for the ordering, going into Sonata for BSS to BSS, East-West interconnectivity, to Legato, to Interlude. I hope most of you already know what those interfaces mean. Applying them and implementing them into our BSS system, OSS system, orchestration enables us to have an on-up to on-up, so orchestration to orchestration integration, OSS to OSS integration, BSS to BSS integration, leading truly to an end-to-end service which is managed across geographies, across domains, across service providers. I think it's quite a fit, and we are quite proud of it, but mostly demonstrate where we are headed and what we add on top of it. So I've been hearing a lot of noise around, for example, Skype not working very well. I hope that with this type of solution, we will be able to blame Skype and not our networks. So moving ahead from here to the road ahead. The road ahead is this. If in the past I knew to build a connection, and as Pascal was saying, 6 weeks to deployment, 6 months to change it, it's kind of not very fun. The road ahead means I need to have it at the click of a button, but I need it also to be responding to environmental challenges, assurance, fiber broke, whatever happening, or just a customer that wants to increase its bandwidth for 2 hours. So to achieve that, we try to kind of paint a picture and ask ourselves, what are the components that we would need in this platform of the future that will enable us to give to our customers, as service provider, whatever type of service they want, right? How do I enable an enterprise to get rid of his IT infrastructure and give it to the service provider so that he will run his whole ICT together? It's a very naive picture. Don't be mistaken. But we have been concentrated in the past into fulfillment, into activation, of course, integration to portals, to BSS, integration to other management system. And now we move forward into assurance. In the past, we had a disconnect between service assurance and network assurance, right? I mean, if a fiber is broken, the network operating center will have to deal with it, and I'm expecting my network to restore itself, and my service will be effectively restored accordingly. We do not have a dedicated service assurance mechanism. More critically, we do not have a dedicated automated service assurance mechanism. And how do we make this happen? So we talked about, of course, analytics. We talked about machine learning. We talked about, event filtering, and so on and so on. A lot of it is going to come in the future. I want, though, to touch into one very specific era, or one very specific domain here. It's design time. When, as an enterprise, I go to my service provider and I ask them, build me please a service, right? So I have an army of product managers. They come to my office and, they talk with us, me and my CIO. What will be this network looking like? What type of features will you want? And so on and so on. They are designing with us the service. Which type of VNF do you want to add? Some of them we want to have it on site. Some of them we want to have it in the data center. And now, what type of restoration mechanism do you want? What type of event are we going to trigger solution for? And so design time becomes a critical part, or I would say, process in which you actually define not only the service, but everything which is underlying this service. So it's not just about the price on I'm getting you an SD-WAN. It's about I'm getting you an SD-WAN with those type of VNF, with those type of services that you will need to chain, that we will need together to verify that they work correctly, that are integrated very well with your OSS BSS system, that we can test, of course, in advance, that you might be able to automatically or self-change via a portal if you wanted to. Imagine the idea of having a portal in which I can choose whatever VNF I want to implement in my CPE or in my network data center. And so to achieve that, we need now to build dedicated design environment pre-integrated with the runtime orchestration mechanism. And those design environment has to be, of course, intuitive, multi-user, but more importantly, they have to be driven by a model. The model effectively is going to define, and really as Pascal just demonstrated earlier, this model has to be adopted by a community, by everybody, so that we all speak the same language, so that we all have the same interfaces. And this model will have to include, of course, the offering, the pricing, the licensing, the decomposition, the resources, the processes, how to run this type of service. Because if I know how to run them in my network, in my domain, do I know how to run them in the next domain, in the inter-carrier, because I'm controlling the end-to-end service, the workflows, and finally, the last piece of it are going to be the assurance policies. You see, if in the past we were looking into assurance as a network topic, in order to run an inter-carrier end-to-end application service, you will need to define a set of policies for the service, for the dedicated, customized service that the enterprise have asked. Now, this is a whole different game, isn't it? To build those type of policy, think about it in a kind of inverse, right? Imagine a situation when your network operating center is completely green, everything is perfect, but your customer calls you and tells you, my network or my service doesn't work. How do you correlate between the network is green, but the service is red? To achieve that, you need to go into the service instances themselves, and you need to define policy for the component of those services. You need to compartmentalize the service into the VNFs, or the functions that are comprehending your service. You need to build for them mechanism of restoration, of management, of changes, of elasticity, that you can then plug together as you build the end-to-end service for your customized customer. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we have been talking very much a lot about creating the service, but we shall not forget that creating is just, I would almost say, the easiest part of it. It's going to be a very interesting challenge moving forward to manage the life cycle of those services across whatever type of change coming. A customer has an idea, wants to do something, a CEO has a town hall, a fiber is broken, or a VNF is having some issues in the data center. I think the time right now is very mature. The announcement of the MEF 3.0 framework is very timely to moving forward into defining what are going to be our specification to achieve that, what's going to be the framework to make it happen. I think we are coming here together as a community, MEF, ONAP, and of course the other organizations, standardization organization, to really try to build together I would say the network of the future, but more importantly, the network-aware service of the future. Let me, with this, spend the last 1.5 minutes to help you, or help ourselves, do that. We've been talking about ONAP, 10 million lines of code. I challenge anybody to read them. Talking about orchestration, building the BSS, OSS of the future. Anybody who have dealt with those topics knows that it's an inventory database. It's a gigantic beast that nobody wants to touch. Fulfillment requires service order management, very complicated machine, millions of dollars of implementation, moving into BSS now, let's go billing and ordering of VNF. It's going to be fun. Fun is not the right word. It's going to be difficult. And it's even more difficult as it is touching now heterogeneous technologies. It touching us very new orchestration mechanism. It forces us to also look into them, understand them, modify them, right? So we want together to build the service model of the future. We want to orchestrate those models together. So one of the things that we at Amdocs have been doing is actually, how do I accelerate this? How do I give you an insight or a tool set so you can actually play with it, test it, bring your VNF to this model, maybe onboard a VNF into a service, create initial services, SD1, security. And so we're providing here, and it's just an example, you're very much welcome to discuss this with us and ask it from us. We are providing orchestration as a service. You get an entry into an internet portal. I'm giving you a username and password, and here you go. You have an ONAP on the cloud with business orchestration on top of it. And you can create your own flows, your own IDs. You can test your VNFs. You can onboard it into a network. You can create a small set of a network. So it's, I would say, our small contribution to but actually move this forward and come together to build literally the networks of the future. With that, I thank you for your time.